That Christmas Eve was supposed to be about gingerbread and nostalgia. Our family's living room was warm with the smell of pine and sugar cookies. My parents' house was decorated exactly the way it had been every year since I was a kid. Twinkling lights on the tree, garland wrapped around the banister. My mom's collection of ceramic snowmen lined up on the mantel. My older sister, Whitney, was holding court in the center of the room like she always did, talking loudly about her new apartment, her new job promotion, her new life. I was curled up in the corner of the couch, half listening, sipping hot chocolate and feeling content. This was my favorite night of the year. The night before Christmas, when everything felt safe and predictable and good. Whitney had brought her new girlfriend, Elise, a quiet woman with dark hair who seemed a little overwhelmed by our loud, chaotic family. Whitney kept touching her arm, laughing too loudly, making sure everyone noticed them. That was Whitney. Everything had to be a performance. Everything had to be the biggest, the brightest, the most dramatic. And I was fine with that. I had always been the quiet sister, the reliable one, the one who did not need the spotlight. Until that night. Until the moment my heart stopped. Whitney had always been like this. Even when we were kids, she was the one who got the lead in school plays while I worked backstage. She was the one who dated the popular guys while I studied in my room. She was the one our parents worried about and fussed over, while I was just there, dependable and boring. I never minded, honestly. I liked being invisible. I liked my quiet life. I worked as a logistics coordinator at Evergreen Outdoor Supplies, a company that sold camping gear and hiking equipment. My job was to make sure snowshoes and thermal socks and tents got where they needed to go. It was not glamorous, but it was steady. It paid my bills. It let me live alone in a small apartment where I could read books and watch old movies and be perfectly content. Whitney thought my life was sad. She had said so multiple times. "Do not you want more, Sophie?" She would ask, wrinkling her nose. "Do not you want excitement?" No, I did not. I wanted peace. I wanted simplicity. I wanted to wake up knowing what my day would look like. And that Christmas Eve, sitting in my parents' living room, I thought I had exactly what I wanted. I had no idea everything was about to shatter. Our grandmother had passed away 2 years earlier. Grandma Rose. She was the kindest, warmest person I had ever known. She smelled like lavender and vanilla. She always had butterscotch candies in her purse. She told the best stories. And when she got sick, when the cancer took over and we all knew she was dying, she called me to her bedside. Whitney was not there. Whitney was traveling or working or busy with something that seemed more important at the time. But I was there. I held Grandma Rose's hand, and she looked at me with those clear, blue eyes and said, "Sophie, I want you to have my ring." It was a beautiful thing. White gold with a delicate floral engraving around the band. A small sapphire in the center, surrounded by tiny diamonds. It was not flashy, but it was elegant. Timeless. She had worn it every day of her life. "This stays with you," she whispered. "Promise me." I promised. I wore it sometimes on special occasions, but mostly I kept it safe in my jewelry box at home. It was my most precious possession, not because of its value, but because of what it meant. It was her love, tangible and real, something I could hold. That evening, as we were finishing dessert, Whitney suddenly stood up. She had that look on her face, the one that meant she was about to make everything about her. "Everyone, I have something special I want to do," she announced, her voice bright and theatrical. My parents looked up, smiling. They always smiled when Whitney performed. Elise looked nervous. Whitney pulled a small velvet box from her pocket. "Elise and I have only been together for a few months," she said, walking over to where Elise was sitting. "But I already know she is special. I wanted to give her something that shows how much she means to me. Something meaningful. She opened the box with a flourish, and my entire world tilted sideways. Inside was a ring. A white gold ring with delicate floral engraving. A small sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds. My grandmother's ring. The room erupted in excited sounds. My mother gasped. My father smiled. Elise looked shocked and touched. And I sat there, frozen, unable to breathe. Whitney slipped the ring onto Elise's finger. "It is just a vintage piece I found," Whitney said casually. "I thought it suited you." Just a vintage piece. My blood ran cold. I stared at that ring on Elise's hand. I knew every detail of it. The way the light caught the sapphire. The tiny scratch on the band from when Grandma had accidentally hit it against a table. The specific pattern of the floral engraving. This was not a similar ring. This was not a coincidence. This was my grandmother's ring. The one that was supposed to be in my jewelry box. The one Grandma Rose had given me with her dying breath. I felt dizzy. Sick. How was it on Elise's finger? How did Whitney have it? I reached into my pocket for my phone, needing something to ground me, needing to do something with my shaking hands. And that was when the notification appeared. A security alert from an app one had almost forgotten I had installed. The Treasure Vault Pawn and Loan. I had set up alerts years ago when I registered my valuable jewelry with them for insurance purposes, just in case anything was ever stolen. The alert showed a photo of a ring. My ring. Listed as sold 3 days ago. December 21st. My hands went numb. I looked up at Whitney, at her bright smile, at the way she was soaking in everyone's attention. She had not just taken my ring. She had pawned it, sold our grandmother's memory for cash, and then bought it back to give it away like it was hers to give. Elise was admiring the ring, holding her hand up to the light. "It is beautiful, Whitney," she said softly. "Are you sure? This looks expensive." Whitney waved her hand dismissively. "You are worth it," she said, and everyone made soft, approving sounds. I needed to get out of that room. I stood up too quickly, almost knocking over my hot chocolate. "Bathroom," I mumbled. Nobody was paying attention to me anyway. They were all focused on Whitney's grand romantic gesture. I walked down the hallway on legs that did not feel like mine, locked myself in the bathroom, and sat on the edge of the tub. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I opened the alert again. There it was. A clinical, clear photo of my grandmother's ring, photographed against a white background. The listing showed it had been pawned for $600 on December 18th, then reclaimed on December 21st for $700. Whitney had pawned my ring for cash. Then, 3 days later, she had paid more money to get it back. Why? To give it to Elise as a gift. To look generous and romantic in front of our whole family. Using my inheritance. Using Grandma Rose's memory. I felt rage and heartbreak colliding in my chest. I sat in that bathroom for 10 minutes, trying to breathe, trying to think. I could hear the muffled sounds of my family laughing in the living room. Someone turned on Christmas music. Everything was normal out there. Everything was destroyed in here. I looked at the pawn shop alert again. The date. December 18th. That was exactly 1 week ago. I tried to remember that day. What had happened? And then it hit me. Whitney had come to my apartment that day. She had called me at work, asking if she could stop by because she thought she had left a scarf there the previous weekend. I told her I would not be home until evening, but she said it was urgent. She needed that scarf for an event. "Can I just grab your spare key from under the mat?" she had asked. "I will be in and out, I promise." I said yes. I trusted her. She was my sister. Why would not I trust her? She must have gone into my apartment, gone into my bedroom, opened my jewelry box, and taken Grandma's ring. Then she drove straight to the treasure vault and pawned it for $600. I felt sick, physically sick. My own sister had stolen from me, had betrayed me, had taken the one thing that mattered most. I splashed cold water on my face and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red. My hands were still shaking. But underneath the shock and hurt, something else was starting to form. Clarity. I was not a fighter. I was not confrontational. I was the quiet sister who kept the peace and stayed out of drama. But this was different. This was not about me being dramatic or making a scene. This was about my grandmother's legacy being stolen and used as a prop in Whitney's performance. I could go back out there right now. I could confront her in front of everyone. I could show them the pawn shop alert and watch her lie crumble. But that was what Whitney would do. Make it big. Make it explosive. Make it all about her, even in her downfall. No, I was going to do this differently. I was going to take back what was mine. But I was going to do it with proof, with patience, and with the calm precision I used at work when I tracked down missing shipments. I was not going to give Whitney the satisfaction of a dramatic scene. I was going to dismantle her lie piece by piece. And then, at exactly the right moment, I was going to take back my ring. I went back to the living room. Everyone was still celebrating. Elise was showing the ring to my mother, who was cooing over it. My father was pouring more wine. Whitney was glowing, basking in the attention. I sat back down in my corner of the couch, quiet as always. Nobody noticed that anything was wrong. Nobody noticed the way I was staring at that ring on Elise's hand. Whitney caught my eye once and smiled, that big, bright smile that had always made people love her. I smiled back, but inside, I was already planning. That night, after the party ended, I drove home in silence. My apartment felt cold and empty. I went straight to my bedroom, straight to my jewelry box. I opened it with shaking hands. The velvet slot where Grandma's ring always sat was empty. Just empty black velvet, slightly compressed where the ring had been. I had hoped, somehow, that I was wrong. That maybe I had moved it somewhere and forgotten. But no, it was gone. Whitney had taken it. And now I knew exactly what I needed to do. The day after Christmas, I went to work even though the office was mostly empty. I could not sit at home with my thoughts. I needed routine. I needed normalcy. But I could not focus. I kept pulling up the pawn shop alert on my phone, staring at the photo, reading the transaction details. My coworker, Maya, found me in the break room at lunch, staring into space. "Hey, Sophie, you okay?" she asked, sitting down across from me. Maya was one of the few people at work I actually talked to. She was direct, no nonsense, the kind of person who called things what they were. I hesitated. Then I showed her my phone. I showed her the alert, explained about my grandmother's ring, told her what Whitney had done. Maya's face went from confused to shocked to absolutely furious in about 30 seconds. "She pawned your dead grandma's ring?" Maya said, too loud, and then gave it to her girlfriend like it was hers? I nodded, tears starting to well up. "What are you going to do?" Maya asked. I took a breath. "I am going to get it back." Maya leaned forward. "How?" I did not have all the answers yet, but I knew where to start. I spent the rest of that week doing research. I learned everything I could about pawn shop transactions, about redemption rights, about ownership claims. The law was murky. Technically, Whitney had pawned the ring, which meant she had a claim to retrieve it, which she did. But morally, ethically, the ring was mine. Grandma had given it to me. Whitney had stolen it from my apartment. The problem was proving it. I had no photos of myself wearing the ring. I had no documentation that it was mine. It was a family heirloom, passed down verbally, with no paperwork. If I went to the police, it would be my word against Whitney's. And Whitney was a much better liar than I was. So I needed a different approach. I needed to make Whitney give it back willingly, or at least make her unable to keep it without exposing herself. On December 30th, I drove to the Treasure Vault Pawn and Loan. It was in a slightly run-down part of town, sandwiched between a laundromat and a check-cashing place. My heart was pounding as I walked in. The shop smelled like old leather and dust. Glass cases displayed watches, jewelry, guitars, electronics. A clerk looked up as I entered. "Can I help you?" I walked up to the counter, trying to look calm. "Hi, I got a security alert from your shop about a ring that was pawned here recently. A white gold ring with a sapphire. I am trying to gather some family records, and I was wondering if I could get a copy of the transaction details." The clerk, a middle-aged man with reading glasses, looked skeptical. "We do not usually give out transaction information. Privacy policies." I nodded. "I understand. But this is a family heirloom. The person who pawned it is my sister. I just need confirmation of the dates for our records. Insurance purposes." It was a weak excuse, but it was all I had. He studied me for a moment. Then he sighed and typed something into his computer. "What is the name on the account?" My mouth went dry. "Whitney Sullivan." He clicked a few more times. "Yeah, I remember this one. Pretty ring. She pawned it on the 18th, came back 3 days later to reclaim it. Paid the fees, took it back." He looked up at me. "Your sister." I nodded. He seemed to make a decision. "Look, I can print you a copy of the pawn ticket. It is public record once it is claimed. Just do not tell anyone I did this." He printed out a single sheet of paper and handed it to me. There it was. Whitney's signature. The date. The amount. Everything I needed. I held that pawn ticket like it was made of gold. This was proof. Real, tangible proof that Whitney had pawned the ring. I thanked the clerk and left, my heart racing. I sat in my car in the parking lot and stared at the paper. $600. That was what our grandmother's memory was worth to Whitney. That was what she had needed so badly she was willing to steal from me. I thought about confronting her right then, but I had to be smart. I had to have more than just a pawn ticket. I needed a plan that would not just expose her, but would get the ring back into my hands. Over the next few weeks, I started saving money. Every extra dollar from my paycheck went into a separate account. I needed to match the $700 Whitney had paid to reclaim the ring. I did not know exactly how I would use it yet, but I knew money would be part of the solution. At work, I threw myself into a complicated shipping problem. A huge order of winter gear had been delayed because of a routing error. I spent days untangling the mess, contacting warehouses, rerouting trucks, fixing the problem. In mid-January, my boss called me into his office and handed me a performance bonus check. $500. It was unexpected. It was perfect. By late January, I had saved $700, the exact amount Whitney had paid to reclaim the ring from the pawn shop. I kept the money in cash in an envelope, hidden in my apartment. I was not sure why. It just felt important to have it ready, tangible, real. Meanwhile, at family dinners, I watched Whitney. She was still with Elise. Still making grand gestures. Still being the center of attention. Elise wore the ring constantly. Every time I saw it on her finger, I felt a jolt of anger and sadness. That was my ring. My grandmother's ring. And nobody knew but me. At a dinner in early February, Whitney showed up with a new designer handbag. Expensive, flashy, covered in logos. "Early birthday present to myself," she announced, laughing. My holiday bonus was better than expected. My mother cooed over the bag. My father shook his head, smiling the way he always did at Whitney's excesses. I felt sick. $600. That was what she got from pawning my ring. And she had spent it on a bag. on something meaningless and temporary. While Elise wore my grandmother's legacy on her finger, completely unaware it was stolen. I excused myself early that night, claiming I had work in the morning. In my car, I cried until I could not cry anymore. In March, I started doing something subtle. At family gatherings, I would casually bring up Grandma Rose. I would tell stories about her. I would mention how much I missed her. And I would talk about her ring. I still remember when she gave me that ring. I said one Sunday at brunch. It meant everything to her. She wore it every single day. My mother nodded, smiling sadly. She loved that ring. It was beautiful. Whitney was at the other end of the table, talking to Elise. She did not react, but I saw her stiffen slightly. The next week, I did it again. I was thinking about Grandma's ring the other day, I said, as we were clearing dishes. The one she gave me before she died. I was wondering if I should get it appraised for insurance purposes. Whitney looked over at me then. Her smile was tight. "Why are you so obsessed with that ring, Sophie?" she asked, her tone light but with an edge. "It is just jewelry." My mother frowned. "It was your grandmother's. It is special." Whitney shrugged. "I just think Sophie should let go of the past a little. Grandma would want us to be happy, not clinging to objects." The words were so perfectly calculated to make me look obsessive. I smiled and changed the subject. But I had planted seeds. I was reminding everyone what that ring meant, so that when the truth came out, they would understand exactly what Whitney had stolen. By April, I had a plan. It was risky. It required perfect timing. And it required Whitney to react exactly the way I thought she would. But I was ready. I called Whitney on a Tuesday afternoon. "Hey, do you and Elise want to grab coffee this weekend?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. "I feel like we have not really gotten to spend time together, just us." Whitney sounded surprised but pleased. "Sure, that sounds nice." Saturday afternoon. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown. The same coffee shop where our family often met for casual get-togethers. The same coffee shop where I knew my parents sometimes stopped by on Saturday afternoons after their grocery shopping. I was counting on routine, on predictability, on the fact that my parents were creatures of habit. Then I did something I had never done before. I called my mother. "Hey Mom, are you and Dad free for coffee on Saturday? Around 2. She said yes. I told her the name of the coffee shop. I did not tell her Whitney would be there. I just let her assume it was a mother-daughter date. Everything was coming together. I had the pawn ticket. I had the cash. I had the meeting set up. I had my parents positioned to witness whatever was about to happen. All I needed now was the courage to actually go through with it. Saturday arrived cold and gray. I dressed carefully, trying to look calm even though my heart was racing. I got to the coffee shop 15 minutes early and ordered a tea I would not drink. I sat at a table near the window and waited. Whitney and Elise arrived right on time. They were holding hands, laughing about something. Elise was wearing the ring. Of course she was. Whitney waved when she saw me and walked over, Elise following. "Hey, Sophie. This is nice. We never do sister time anymore." We all sat down. They ordered fancy lattes. I made small talk, asking about their week, about work, about their plans for spring. I was stalling, waiting. At 2:15, I saw my parents' car pull into the parking lot. Perfect. They were right on time. I waited until they were inside the coffee shop, ordering at the counter. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope. Inside was the pawn ticket and $700 in cash. I placed the envelope on the table between us. "Whitney, I need to talk to you about something," I said quietly. Her smile faltered. "Okay." I slid the pawn ticket out of the envelope and placed it face up on the table. "Can you explain how Grandma's ring ended up in a pawn shop?" The color drained from Whitney's face. She stared at the pawn ticket like it was a snake. Elise leaned forward, confused. "What is that?" she asked. I kept my voice calm steady. "It is a pawn ticket from the treasure vault. It shows that on December 18th, Whitney pawned a white gold ring with a sapphire. The same ring our grandmother gave me before she died. The same ring Whitney gave you on Christmas Eve." Elise looked at the ticket, then at the ring on her finger, then at Whitney. "Whitney, what is she talking about?" Whitney's mouth opened and closed. "That is insane, Sophie. You are being dramatic. That ring is not the same." I cut her off by sliding the security alert photo across the table. The one the pawn shop had sent me. It showed my grandmother's ring, clear as day, with the transaction details underneath. This is the photo from the pawn shop listing. You can see the engraving. The same engraving on the ring Elise is wearing right now. Elise slowly took the ring off her finger and held it up, looking at the engraving. Her face went pale. "Whitney, this is the ring you gave me." Whitney was panicking now. "Sophie, I do not know what you think you know, but you are wrong. That pawn shop made a mistake. That is not your ring. I bought this from an antique store." I pulled out my phone and showed her the security alert I had received on Christmas Eve. The timestamp, the photo, the notification that my registered jewelry had been listed for sale. The pawn shop has my grandmother's ring registered in their security system because I set up alerts years ago for insurance purposes. This notification came through the moment you pawned it. 3 days before you gave it to Elise. Whitney's face was bright red now. She was trapped. Elise was staring at her, the ring sitting on the table between them like evidence at a trial. "You stole her grandmother's ring?" Elise said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And pawned it? And then gave it to me?" I spoke before Whitney could answer. "She came to my apartment on December 18th. She said she needed to pick up a scarf. I gave her permission to use my spare key. Instead, she went into my bedroom, opened my jewelry box, and took the ring my grandmother left me." I looked directly at Whitney. "Then you pawned it for $600. Then you paid $700 to reclaim it so you could give it to Elise and look generous." Whitney was shaking now. "Sophie, I was going to tell you. I just needed the money temporarily. I was going to put it back." The lies were falling apart in real time. "You gave it away," I said flatly. "If you were planning to put it back, why did you give it to Elise on Christmas Eve?" Whitney had no answer. She just sat there, her mouth opening and closing. Elise stood up abruptly. "I cannot believe this. I cannot." She took off the ring and placed it carefully on the table in front of me. "This is yours, Sophie. I am so sorry. I had no idea." She looked at Whitney with disgust. "I need to go." She walked out of the coffee shop, and Whitney half stood, like she was going to follow, then sank back down. I slid the envelope with the $700 across the table. "This is what you paid to reclaim the ring from the pawn shop. I am buying it back from you. Right now." Whitney stared at the money. "Sophie, please. I made a mistake. Do not do this in public. Let's talk about this at home." I shook my head. "No. We are doing this right here, right now." That was when my mother's voice cut through the tension. "Sophie? Whitney? What is going on?" I turned. My parents were standing there, their coffee cups in hand, staring at our table, at the pawn ticket, at the cash, at the ring sitting between us. My mother walked over slowly, my father right behind her. "What is all this?" she asked, her voice tight with worry. I picked up the pawn ticket and handed it to her. "Mom, do you remember Grandma's ring? The one she gave me before she died?" My mother's face softened. "Of course. That beautiful sapphire ring." I pointed to the ring on the table. "Whitney stole it from my apartment in December. She pawned it for $600. Then she reclaimed it and gave it to Elise on Christmas Eve, pretending it was just a vintage piece she bought. My mother read the pawn ticket, her eyes going wide. She looked at Whitney. "You pawned your grandmother's ring?" "The one she left to Sophie." Whitney's voice was small, desperate. "I needed money. I was going to get it back. I did get it back. I wanted to give Elise something special." My father picked up the ring, turning it over in his hands. He saw the inscription on the inside of the band. The one Grandma had engraved years ago. "To my Rose, forever." "This is definitely Grandma's ring," he said quietly. His voice was heavy with disappointment. My mother sat down hard in the empty chair. "Whitney, how could you?" The coffee shop was quiet. Other patrons were pretending not to listen, but absolutely listening. Whitney was crying now, real tears, not her usual performative ones. "I made a mistake. I am sorry. Sophie, please." I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel like the little sister. I did not feel small or invisible or easy to dismiss. "You stole from me," I said. "You pawned our grandmother's memory for cash to buy a handbag or pay for a fancy dinner, or whatever you needed it for that week. Then you used it to make yourself look generous and romantic in front of our whole family." I pushed the $700 toward her. "This is what you paid to get it back from the pawn shop. Take it. We are even." My mother put her hand on mine. "Sophie, you do not have to pay her back. She stole from you." I shook my head. "I want to. I want this to be clean. No debts. No excuses." I looked at Whitney again. "Take the money. And we are done." Whitney stared at the cash, then at me. Slowly, with shaking hands, she took the envelope. She stood up without another word and walked out of the coffee shop. The door chimed behind her. My father sat down where Whitney had been. We all looked at each other. Then my mother gently picked up the ring and handed it to me. "This is yours. This has always been yours." I held my grandmother's ring for the first time in months. It felt heavier than I remembered. Or maybe I just felt lighter. My mother was crying softly. "I am so sorry, Sophie. I had no idea she would do something like this." My father just shook his head, looking older than I had ever seen him. "We failed you. We should have noticed. We should have." I cut him off gently. "It is okay, Dad. I got it back. That is what matters." But it was not just okay. Things had shifted. My parents were seeing Whitney clearly for the first time, seeing past her charm and her performance to the selfishness underneath. And they were seeing me clearly too. Not as the quiet, boring daughter who never needed anything, but as someone strong enough to fight for what was hers. We sat there for a long time, talking quietly. I told them the whole story. How I had discovered the theft. How I had planned this confrontation. How I had saved the money and gathered the proof. My mother held my hand the whole time, and my father listened with a grim expression. When I finished, he said, "I am proud of you, Sophie. You handled this with more grace than I would have." That meant more to me than he would ever know. The next few months were awkward. Whitney stopped coming to family dinners. My parents tried to reach out to her, but she was not responding. Elise broke up with her 2 days after the coffee shop confrontation. I felt bad about that, but not bad enough to regret what I had done. By summer, things had settled into a new normal. My parents and I had dinner every other week. We talked more. Really talked about real things. And I wore Grandma's ring every day. In July, Whitney finally called me. Her voice was subdued. "Sophie, I have been in therapy, trying to figure out why I did what I did. I do not expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to know I am sorry. Really sorry." I was quiet for a moment. "Thank you for saying that." We did not become close again. Maybe we never would be, but it was something. A start, maybe. Or just an ending that was not as bitter as it could have been. I chose to believe she meant it. I chose to let go of the anger, not for her, but for me. Because holding on to it was not worth it. The ring was back where it belonged. And that was enough. That Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after Whitney gave away my grandmother's ring, I hosted a small gathering at my apartment. My parents came. Maya came. A few other friends from work. No Whitney. She was invited, but she declined, saying she was not ready. I understood. The evening was quiet, cozy, nothing like my family's usual chaotic celebrations. We ate cookies and drank cocoa and exchanged small gifts. And when someone asked about the ring I was wearing, I told the story. Not the painful parts, just the good parts. About Grandma Rose. About her kindness. About what the ring meant to her and what it meant to me. Later, after everyone left, I sat on my couch with the lights off, just the glow of the Christmas tree illuminating the room. I looked at the ring on my finger, at the way it caught the light. I thought about the pawn shop alert that had changed everything. About the choice I made to fight back quietly, legally, methodically. I did not gloat about what happened. I did not need to. I had my treasure back. Whitney had nothing but the memory of what she had lost. And me? I had peace. The unshakable peace of knowing I had fought, honorably and patiently, for what was mine. That was my real Christmas gift. Not the ring itself, but the person I became in taking it back.